down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the savvy landlord as your host.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is incredible because we are actually doing a real full-blown episode of the Savvy Radio Show in the office, in the studio, with real microphones and a 6-track recorder. And, you know, I think it's been almost a year or more. I mean, COVID 2020, maybe 2 years since I've done an in-person interview, and I wanted to do it right, and I wanted to do it authentic with someone that I would love to introduce to you that in a weird, unique way has impacted me. And so this individual, I'm going to just say his name is Ben Scott. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate you. But it's interesting. I remember vividly really connecting with Ben, and it was like a 50-50, like, is this dude for real or is he something else? Because I was laying on the couch one day and I get a Facebook request for one of my properties that he saw on MLS. And he was schooling me really quickly. Why don't you have photos on here? Mm-hmm. I'm looking for, I'm like, who is this Ben Scott guy? In my mind, I'm like, I know this dude. I'm like, he's talking like an educated real estate individual. And I was like, man, and I'm like screenshotting what he's asking me and blowing up my other realtor. I'm not joking. Like, you don't know that story, and so I didn't think nothing of it. And, I just, I genuinely thought that Ben was helping me with my listing. And on my side, my listing was the house was a disaster and we didn't want photos.
And that's essentially what I figured. That's usually why there's no photos on MLS. But there's also lazy agents out there.
Yes.
And so I was trying to suss out if you were working with a lazy agent or if there was a reason why you didn't have the photos.
Savvy, man. That's why you're on the radio show. So I didn't think nothing. A couple months clicked by, and then all of a sudden I keep seeing Ben Scott's name at random. And let me tell you why. So I'm on, for some weird reason, I was on Facebook again, and I got an ad for Bigger Pockets. And I click on Bigger Pockets. And, I'm a fan of Bigger Pockets. I've been on Bigger Pockets for a long time, and I appreciate what they have done. And I think they have changed the industry. I think they have truly educated people, and I love what they're doing. And so I was like, it posed a question. Do you need an agent, a realtor? And I was like, this is such a bizarre question. So I'm filling out a form. So unconsciously, like not knowing what they're spooning me up, and they serve only 4 real estate agents, and I was like, wait a minute. There's over several million people in a million people in Oklahoma City, 1.2 million. There's almost 1 million people in Tulsa. I know at least 100 real estate investors personally, and I'm thinking to myself, I know there's over thousands of agents, and there's only 4 on Bigger Pockets. And you know whose name was on that list? Mm-hmm. Ben Scott. Okay. I was like, what the hell is this? I was like, there is something weird happening. And then long story short, I do work at an accounting firm, and Ben Scott's name popped up again. And I was intrigued. I was talking to another real estate investor, and I could tell this individual real estate investor was green and really not knowing what they were doing. And I'm trying to decipher what they're trying to say. And like, I'm 21 years old. I haven't done my taxes in a couple of years. I have a side hustle and have a rental property. I need help. And I was like, he's like, no one's ever taught me this. And I was like, okay, how'd you hear about us? And this guy's like, Ben Scott. And I was like, so I called my partner. I was like, hey, I don't know who this Ben Scott guy is, but I think it's very important that I communicate to him. And so this is how this all happened. So I call Ben Scott. I'm like, these like all these moons align. I need to call this dude. Why? I have no idea. I'm literally on the phone with Ben Scott, like, hey man, I just want to say thank you for referring this person. Like, that was my agenda, is to call him and appreciate him for sending us a customer for the accounting firm. And it led into like this really cool conversation about helping people, bringing value, and just understanding the real estate market. And I was like, bro, I've got to have you on the radio show if that's cool with you. And he was like, absolutely, I'm a fan. I'm like, oh no, you really listen to the podcast?
I do. In fact, I want to tell the story.
Okay.
So before I got into real estate, I worked at KFOR, the NBC affiliate in Oklahoma City. So I did advertising sales. And one of the things I always ask clients about is what podcast do you listen to? And I was already investing in real estate. I already kind of had a background in real estate, but I still had the W-2 job. And so there was a client, a real estate-based client, and I asked her what podcast she likes, and she said, The Savvy Landlord. And one thing I like about it is because it's in Oklahoma City. So I, Google up Savvy Landlord, and I started listening to the podcast, and I enjoyed it. And I kind of had this vision of who you were. Or
was that African American?
That's exactly what I was about to say. And so I was jogging at the track by my house, and Steven's talking about something. He said, yeah, people think I'm this, people think I'm that, people think I'm African American. And I literally did a stutter step. I go, wait, he's not? And then I had to find you online. I go, wow, he's a white dude like me.
I know. It's weird. I grew up in the inner city, and sometimes it just comes out. When you're ingrained in something, in uneducatedness or self-belief, this is who you are. I mean, it's not genuinely an act. Sometimes I'm all ghetto and sometimes I'm not. I mean, it's just interesting. But I'm just honored that you even listen to the podcast. I'm honored that you're willing to come today. But my goal and just want to get this out of the bag, ladies and gents, is I think Ben is a rock star realtor, and we don't have enough of them. Obviously, there was only 4 people, and I'm assuming you pay for this ad on Bigger Pockets?
Yeah, it's so my background with Bigger Pockets goes back a couple years.
Yeah,
when the pandemic hit, I started doing Zoom calls so investors could get together virtually because we couldn't get together in person. And then did that at the start of 2020 and kind of created a little community of folks that we'd meet every couple weeks online, but never in person because of the pandemic. But we were sharing references, we were sharing lenders, we were sharing handymen, contractors. And I kind of realized I could really help create a community of people that could help each other. And then so that kind of,
it was a natural progression?
Yeah, it was a natural progression.
It's almost like this cool virtual RIA that you created.
And then we started doing in-person meetups, and we do them once a quarter. Our next one's May 19th, so reach out to me if you'd like more details on it.
Yeah, is there a website, or do you or just go to Bigger Pockets? How does it work?
Oh, you could find me on Instagram, Ben Scott Sells Homes, and I could send you all the details.
SELLSHOMES?
Correct.
Ben Scott. There'll be a link in the description, ladies and gentlemen. So, okay, let's just dial back a little bit. How did you get in? So you were in the news industry for a while?
Yeah, so my background is actually on air. So I started out as a sports broadcaster. And
personality?
Yes, yeah.
A little handsome guy.
Yeah, KOAM TV in Joplin, Missouri. I was there for 2 years. I call that my Vietnam. It's being a young single man in Joplin, Missouri is not...
there's no highlight there.
Yeah, there's no highlight. Everyone already has 3 kids. That's your age. So I was there for 2 years, and I was the weekend sports anchor. So I got to cover, the Kansas City Chiefs when they had like Priest Holmes, Trent Green, Dick Vermeil, and then Pittsburgh State University, which is the big football team there. And I parlayed that into a job in Tulsa at the Fox affiliate and was there for a couple years. And then I was knocking on 30. I was getting ready to get married. I was making no money. I was working weekends. And I was like, I need to do something different. And so I got into media sales. And then so I parlayed that into about a 10-year career in media sales. And then my last job was at KFOR, Channel 4 here in Oklahoma City. And so I already had that sales background. So when I decided to transfer my career into real estate, I kind of already had those skills on the sales background. And the skills being that when you're in sales, you're solving a problem. And so I identified that whether it's investors or owner-occupy, everybody has a problem, which is they need housing or they need an investment or they need to put their money to work. And so I just had a mindset of I'm going to help solve this person's problem and bring value to them that way.
So, okay, how did you hear the word real estate? I mean, obviously people that are in broadcasting, they're on television or they're behind the scenes. It's an all-consuming career, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, people that are in it, they're in it for life. Interesting, this another side note. Do you know Dutch Ravenberg? He was, whatever his name is.
No,
he was my first realtor in Oklahoma City back in like 1990 something, and he worked at ESPN. So it's just a little fascinating little thing. Yeah. But so your all-consuming broadcasting career, I mean, how did you even think about real estate? Was there Was there a book? I mean, was there someone who introduced you to real estate? I mean, sales is obviously the best thing on the planet because that's what makes the world go round. Nothing happens unless a sale happens. But how'd you get turned on to real estate?
Oh, well, my family's always been kind of involved in real estate. My family has rental properties that I help manage. I had a couple rental properties myself coming up in North Tulsa, and then sold those when I moved to Oklahoma City. But I'd always kind of had like one foot in real estate. And then, like a lot of people, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that really completely changed my mindset as to my investing career, just my life, and what I'm devoting my time to. And so once I read that book, I really was kind of a come to Jesus moment of, I've been thinking about my entire adult career all wrong. And I've been working for other people to make them money.
Okay.
Versus, I mean, I was getting paid, of course, but
Sure.
it wasn't creating wealth for me long term. And then so at that point, I decided to just go all in with real estate, just because it's kind of that, the Viking ship.
Burn the bridge.
Yeah, burn the bridge.
How long ago was that?
About 3 years.
So 3 years ago.
And I'd had my license part-time, and I was doing a lot of deals on the side. I was buying deals for myself and representing myself. But I knew I'd look back if I didn't try to go in 100%. I know I'd regret it. And then so I just did the burn the ships thing and haven't looked back.
I was going to say the word no regret. And so was there like a pressure point that just made you mad in the corporate world?
It was, and now I'm grateful for it, but my biggest client at Channel 4 was Mathis Brothers. And they had some change in ownership, some change in strategy, and they decided to cut way back on their television
And
ads.
you make percentages of that.
Correct. So my income was literally cut in half overnight by that decision.
And your job is like out climbing it and knocking on doors to get people to advertise on KFOR.
Yeah, but you can't replace the Mathis Brothers with 100 local advertisers.
Yeah, I'm assuming they were spending like $100,000 a month.
They're spending over $1 million a year.
Yeah, I would assume.
Yeah, and so when they decided that they were changing strategy, then my income was cut in half, literally overnight, and I didn't like somebody else having that type of power over my income.
Life.
Yeah, in life.
Because it affected you.
Yeah.
You might not be able to eat.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like that feeling that one person's decision will affect my family and my family's life, and so I decided I need to be more in charge of my outcome.
All right, so it sounds glamorous, right? You got slapped in the face, and then you're like, okay, but wasn't it nerve-wracking? I mean, because it's not instant income in real estate.
Correct.
I mean, it's at least a minimum of 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So what'd you do after that? Did you just like call the broker and I want to hang my license because you were kind of having your license on the back burner?
Well, I already had my license, so I already had some clients, but
These are buyer's agent. I mean, you were representing buyers.
Buyers and sellers.
Okay.
But I just decided that if I wasn't devoting 100% of my time to it, and what could I do if I did?
Okay.
But I already had like kind of a groundwork. I wasn't like I started.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just got committed.
Correct.
I mean, you had your toe in it, and you knew the nuances of it, and the headaches of it, and the timetable of it. You just said, "Hey, I'm going to go do this full time." So, like, what was your first step? Like, did you just advertise? Did you just make more calls? I mean, did you apply your sales skills?
The first step was actually bigger pockets. I decided I'm probably not going to be a luxury list agent. That's probably not who I am.
Okay, so you're breaking it down in your mind.
Yeah. So I'm like,
What industry? Who's your client base?
Yeah, who's my client? And then create an identity around that client to attract that client.
This is very fascinating. This is 3 years ago, so this is like right before COVID.
Correct.
So you go all in to real estate on faith.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so now you're trying to narrow down who can I connect with? And so you already been an investor. You're familiar with your family that has a few rental properties. And so your mindset is like, okay, I can understand. I can jive with these people. Because like selling advertising to Mathis Brothers is a game. It's like presentation, how you look, how you communicate. It's a weird just dichotomy of, hey, I'm the little sales guy and you're this massive behemoth. And if I don't dot every I, or give you some sort of a concession, I could lose you, or they could just kick you off the table.
Yeah.
And so,
well, one thing that's difficult about selling advertising or marketing in itself is that it's very hard to point to a direct result.
quantify.
Yeah. unless, and I've met with business owners that unless somebody walked in and said, I saw your ad on Channel 4 this morning and I'm here to purchase a lawnmower, then they would say it didn't work. And so that was very frustrating because I was like, well, is your business up? They're like, yeah, things are great. But nobody's telling me they're seeing my ad. I go, well, that's not how people work. And so one thing I liked about real estate, especially working with investors, is you can break down the numbers and say, this is what you can make per year. This is potentially what this property will be worth in 5 years. Here's your tax advantages. And then it's all binary. It's right there. And it's a direct result that you can point to versus marketing is kind of a...
So your niche, so how'd you define your niche of real estate investors? Just that was your first choice?
I thought that's where I could provide the most value since I'm an investor myself.
Okay. And then understanding.
Correct.
And communication. Yeah. Level of, I know exactly what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. That always scares me as a real estate investor. You're an investor yourself.
Correct.
But then why don't you, here's a hard question for you, man. This is something that's always burned into my heart. Why would I want to work with you when you can, are you selling me the crumbs? And why aren't you taking that first deal? It always feels kind of awkward. Like, there's realtors out there that they're just clueless, right? They're just transactions. They're just volume, paycheck, job. And then there's a very, very few people like you on this planet that have an understanding of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to serve your client. But do you ever is it temptation like, oh, I can do this deal myself, but hey, I'm going to go give it to this investor instead? I mean, are you always in a constant, that's why I'm not a realtor, because I think it's a conflict of interest for me, because am I really serving my client? But you expressed to me earlier, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, because I kind of, hinted to that when I was like, hey, I'm in the commercial and you have a goal and a mission. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you share the wealth in that aspect? Because you're on the front lines, you can get a pocket deal. What goes through your mind? And is that a conflict of interest at all? I mean, am I off balance?
It hasn't been because A, I don't have an endless amount of capital. So even if there is a deal, maybe I'm already tied up in another deal and couldn't do it. B, I have a pretty narrow wheelhouse about what I want to invest in and where. And if it's not in that wheelhouse, then it's not a good fit for me. So my wheelhouse is very narrow. I mean, I don't want to go somewhere that's out of my comfort zone or really somewhere that's far from my house. Okay. And so if there's a deal in Norman or a deal in Yukon, I've talked to this guy. He's like, hey, I'm looking for multifamily in Yukon. If you run across any, then you let me know. But that's not something I'm interested in.
Okay.
And so probably 19 out of 20 deals that I become aware of, I have no interest in personally. So there's not really a conflict of interest in terms of trying to direct my clients towards those.
All right. So you are a very disciplined individual. So you're like, I'm only investing in this type of class of investment, this many bedrooms or whatever, and this one farm zone. And you're just patient and waiting for those deals to materialize.
Correct.
Anything outside of there, you got to eat. So, and you like enjoying working with investors because they usually don't play around, right? Mm-hmm. They
not emotional.
They're not emotional. Mm-hmm. I just was listening to it.
But they all want a deal. Then they all want a grand slam. And so I've had to tell investors that be happy with a couple singles and doubles to in your path to build wealth, because everybody wants the home run on their first or second deal, and you might have one or two home runs in your entire career.
I agree.
So build your portfolio with some singles and doubles.
I agree. I mean, and I used to just hang on to this 70%, number, and then at 75, and then 80, at where what you're trying to articulate, and I'm going to try to articulate it for you, is like, this depends on where you're at in your career of investing. Because like I would pay 80%, almost 90% in Edmond, because I know that it would appreciate. And my philosophy now, because I used to be in low income for so long, those properties sit for so long, and then trying to find a end buyer, someone psycho crazy like me. So, but if I invest in Edmond, which at this price point of 150 to 250, I know that I could sell that property at a quick sale if necessary. And I think I would be willing to pay 90%. Or before 10, 20 years ago, everything had to be distressed. Mm-hmm. Everything has to be 70%. It's got to be the 2% rule. And I just think that over time that matures. And I'm assuming that's what kind of client bases that you have. You have people that are down for the east side of Oklahoma City. You have people that are even not even 1%. I'm assuming that you work with a doctor or two that just wants to park their money.
Yeah, I work with a lot of out-of-state investors, like high net worth, high income W-2 earners that make a good income, but they can't invest in real estate in California because your mortgage would be more than your rent. And it just doesn't make sense.
So why are they here, though? Why do they pick Oklahoma over 50 other states?
Oklahoma's been identified by a lot of investors as a place where you can still get deals with that 1% rule, and you can still cash flow. And so believe it or not, there's not a lot of markets right now where you can cash flow rental property. It's more of just buy it and just hope for the appreciation. We're also a linear market. We don't have the wild upswings that a Vegas or a Phoenix or a Florida does. So there's some stability and attractiveness in that respect. And so markets like Tulsa, Wichita, Oklahoma City, some towns in Ohio, Atlanta, for whatever reason, a lot of out-of-state investors have identified those communities as places as a safe place to park money. Like after we get off this call today, I'm running out to a house we have under contract in Midwest City. My buyers are from Israel. Yeah, they live in Tel Aviv, but they've decided we want to invest in Oklahoma City.
And they're coming in today?
No. I'm going to. We put it under contract sight unseen, so I'm going to see what type of disaster we're working with. But they will come here. And so I think that's wildly interesting that people...
I think it's wildly interesting that you're talking to these people.
I know.
Like, how do you vet them out? Like, your time's precious. How do you know if they're genuine? What's your make? Because like...
Oh, you can really suss out if somebody's genuine. I mean, being in, you've been BS'd before, I'm sure, especially with tenants. Like, I have a pretty good BS detector.
Okay.
I feel like now, where I can tell if somebody's genuine pretty quickly. And they send me their proof of funds, which helps.
Okay. And even from Israel?
Yeah. They have, several $100,000 parked in an American bank they're looking to deploy in Oklahoma City. And so I was actually on a Telegram call with them, and I get off, and I look at my wife. She's like, "Who's that?" And I go, "A couple guys in Tel Aviv, Israel."
And I was like, how'd they meet you?
Through Bigger Pockets.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So then you have a process for people that are out of the country. I mean, across the world. Mm-hmm. And you kind of work with them and get their nuance of what they're looking for. So like in this case, are they looking for anything that cash flows? Or how do they know Midwest City's better than Southside Oklahoma City or Norman? I mean, or Norman's better than Edmond? Do you guide them in this decision-making process?
I said, they're wanting to do a kind of a Burr model where they can get something at a discount, do a remodel and rent it out. And so I said, we kind of defined some narrow metrics of, 3-bedroom, built after 1950, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, and then just make cash offers, lower cash offers on 10 properties, and we'll land one of them eventually. Just law of averages.
So who handles all this rehab?
So we'll if you're a contractor listening to this call, like I have work for you, so please reach out, because that's often the most difficult part of this business is finding reliable. Yeah, and I have contractors that I worked with, but if you're good, you're busy. And
so you just do the transaction and hope for the best for them.
But I don't do the transaction and leave. I help them guide through that process.
Right. Because you remind me of a wonderful realtor I had in Florida. I mean, the dude was just like you. I mean, very rare. Like the way you talk, the way you're thinking. I'm like, I bought this property down there, and he would unlock the door for me. I mean, within reason, right? I mean, it wasn't like he lived not far from there and he was on the way there. But it was always nerve-wracking as an investor. I don't know anyone in this market. These people are from Israel.
And I take that to heart. I had 4 buyers from California last year. And one guy, he'd never been to Oklahoma, but he actually came to Oklahoma last week for a work trip. And so I took him to lunch, and I drove him by his quadplex in Oklahoma City that he owned and took a picture of it.
Cool.
Took a picture of him in front of his quadplex. Yeah. And I just thought that was really cool. Like, this guy's never been to Oklahoma City, but he trusted me to go identify the property, do inspections, negotiate the terms of the contract, and buy it. And I set him up with a property manager. He's cash flowing, doing well. And I don't know, that kind of turns me on, that part of...
Well, I was about to say, this is like some crazy satisfaction for you.
Yeah.
You just set their life free in motion forever. Like, I'm wealthy because of people like you. Mm-hmm. And I try to tell people, like my banker, like I'm wealthy because that you trusted me with my very first loan, and I still talk to that person.
Yeah, and if you help other people get wealthy, ultimately, hopefully, you get wealthy as well. Because if at the end of the day, I think if you just provide value, things are going to sort themselves out.
So that's like for you. So right now you're in the 3 years in the game. You're on the front line of the trenches. Now you've seen this crazy cycle. I mean, this is your first cycle of bubble, right?
Yeah.
So you got in at a crazy time. Well, what has sustained you? Why haven't you quit? Because it's just scandalous out there.
I know. It's very...
And how do you sleep at night? I mean, because people are just lying and prices are way out of control and appraisers are just on drugs. And
appraisers are actually coming around to the appreciation in the market. I've seen in the last 6 months, at the beginning of 2021, they were looking at 6-month-old data, and it's like that doesn't apply anymore.
That's true.
And they were busting deals. And I think, and so when an appraiser busts a deal, the agent doesn't get paid, the lender doesn't get paid, no one's getting paid. And I think everyone's like,
they made their money. That's what pissed me off.
Yeah, they made their money.
They made their $500, $600, $500, whatever it is today. Yeah. So,
but I'd like to get because I have at least 4 or 5 calls a week with newer investors that they've read all the books, they've downloaded the spreadsheets, they have their numbers all lined out, and they're looking to take action. But it's hard to find a deal right now. And given that you've been through a couple cycles, I mean, as a newer investor, is this a good time to jump in? Should you wait for a crash? Because I get that question all the time. Is it going to crash? And I don't necessarily think it will for a bunch of reasons I could explain, but no, I'd be curious as to your perception of how the market is today in April 2022?
Well, I mean, it's a wonderful question. The simple and cheeseball answer is that you should always be buying at any time.
And that's what I tell people.
I mean, it's just the truth. I mean, it's never going to be a good time. I mean, you get in, you learn, you maybe, earn your stripes and buy the wrong property and lose 10,000, but it will balance out over time. Mm-hmm. Now, do I think it's going to crash? I think it's definitely loosening up, and I can't articulate where and why, because interest rates go up, people can't buy as bigger homes, there's a flux, but we're building as fast and people are buying them before they're built, and so we have a housing shortage here, so they're not making any more. So I don't know. I just think there will be a lot of REOs at some time, because you got to look at it like, how can we have the HARP program years ago that caused a lot of problems, and deferred payments now with COVID. I just think over time that it's gonna show its rearing head, because someone's not gonna make their payment. If you haven't been making their payment for 1.5 to 2 years, and the government's just giving you the pass, somehow someone's that's gonna have to come into light, and then they're not gonna be in a position. But inflation's up so high, people are getting paid 20-30% more than they did 2 years ago. Maybe they can afford that payment now, and that all balance out. I really don't know. But the key factor, I think, that to really encourage people is this. Number one, there's always someone willing to sell you a deal. Mm-hmm. There's always someone passing away. There's always someone in a hardship. There's something going on all the time. And I think that's the number one thing you need to be aware of. When I got in 1999, it was almost the same kind of climate that we're in today. It was 7-8% interest. There wasn't deals. But I was so ignorant, I didn't know any difference, and I just kept buying. Yeah, I bought a couple bad ones, and I still own those today, and they balanced out over time. It's crazy. There's houses that have doubled and tripled in value on the east side. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question quickly, it's like, yeah, absolutely, get in the game if possible. And it was just going to take you longer to find a deal, but you can't give up. And, my philosophy back then, it was relentless. I'm going to be rich. I'm tired of being broke and poor. And I can find that through Rich Dad Poor Dad said, you can do it. And so I proved that you can. So you can too. And if you're out there and you're desperate and you're hurting, and just find people like Ben, and every other week you guys are having a freaking virtual call. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a great accountability. What a great opportunity to connect, and just don't give up. There will be deals. I'm telling you, there will be deals. You just don't give up. And I know you're watching Facebook. And I know you see some idiot up there. Yep, I just closed 30 deals this month. Bring me 2 more. Okay, let me clarify that shit for you right now. It is asinine, because they're overpaying for deals. And the money that they're getting for those deals are ignorant people giving them private money that don't know what an ROI is. Okay, so if that looks glamorous to you that they're doing 30, 60 deals, I would say it's possible, but are they really cash flowing? And that's what you have to look at. I've learned at a young, and I have 50 units. I'm up to 150 units, but I'm broke as a joke. It's about cash flow. Now at 48 years old, 23 years in the game, I'm telling you right now, I'd rather have 2 units that cash flow like a monster and be content.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know you're educated, man, and I know you just think that way. That's why you're not really worried about deals. That's why you're serving your clients, and opportunities will come your way in your niche zone. I just wish I was that disciplined at that time and be, when you're so ignorant, you don't know what's happening. Now I know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't even look at those deals like, say, in Shawnee. I just knew Shawnee was always a disaster. It's low grade. It's just a nightmare. But the insurance is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Taxes are a little bit cheaper, but your transportation time is much greater, and your clientele is way worse.
Yeah.
Because there's no industry there.
And I think a lot of investors get so locked into their spreadsheet and like that this makes sense on paper.
Man, that's a great question.
And then, but then I'll say, trying to think of some. I told one investor, and my apologies to anybody who lives southeast, but I've said any address with a southeast.
Oak Cliff?
I don't know.
Bryant?
Maybe.
Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I have a house over there.
Okay.
So
I've told, and I'm sure there's pockets that are nice, but I told anybody, if there's an address with an SE in front of it, you might have problems. And here's why. So while something looks good on paper, one area that I'm kind of excited about is Lawton. I've been working some deals in Lawton, and there's, they call it the Shady 580. It is, Lawton is what Lawton is, but there's some deals down there that cash flow right now. I have one client in Phoenix that is buying 2 duplexes down there, 4 doors, and it's going to cash flow like $1,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this spreadsheet thing, because like you said something that's very interesting to me. I worked with a real estate investor out of Houston, and everything was about number. Man, the return is 18%. And I'm like, dude, you have no idea what it's like to tile a whole house and the next day they destroy the whole property.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there needs to be an emotional factor to it to a degree so you know who you're dealing with. Because on a spreadsheet, it all sounds glamorous, but we're dealing with humans. We're dealing with people that have jobs. We're dealing with people with boyfriends. We're dealing with people with kids. And life happens, and you can't just trust the spreadsheet. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
I've just noticed that. I used to talk to an investor, and you're killing. I mean, yeah, I'm killing it, but it's like it's a full-time job picking up after people.
Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, your spreadsheet doesn't account for the $100 you'll have to pay the locksmith to change the locks because the boyfriend broke up with the girlfriend,
or kick the door in.
Yeah,
and it goes
or
on.
shut the door in. I mean, there's a lot of just like you said, you're dealing with people, and it's where they live, and a lot of stuff goes down where you live, and so that's why I think you can't just get locked into a spreadsheet as to this makes sense on paper. You have to apply some like real world. And that's where I feel like I provide value, especially to out-of-state clients. Like that, this looks good on paper. It will cash flow this, but here are some potential headaches you might have. We need to think about those before we pursue this deal.
Well said. Now, you mentioned you're all excited about Lawton. Why? Tell us why you think Lawton is such a great...
I'm excited about Lawton if you're looking for cash flow. I'm not excited about Lawton in general. Like I'm not going down there to hang out. I like Medicine Park. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the mountains. But if you're looking for deals that cash flow, let's talk about Lawton.
You know what's interesting? I just think it's management intensive there because there's got to be a lot of transitional people because of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a high level of turnover, which eventually eats your cash flow.
Correct.
So what's your client base? So this fourplex or two duplexes. What type of rent is that? Give us some perspective on that.
Okay, just this one in particular. We got it under contract for $90.
For all 4 units?
Correct.
Okay.
So
it's $22.50 a unit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And each 1-bedroom unit rents for $525.
Okay.
So it's
2% rule.
Mm-hmm. And they're all fully occupied. It has a property manager that's been working the property for several years. She has a good relationship with the tenants. And so, I had some buyers in Phoenix wanting to purchase in Oklahoma City because they flip homes in Scottsdale. And they're like, we can't find any deals. Everything's so expensive. And so they identified Oklahoma City as a place to invest. And I said, well, this deal in Lawton just came across my desk. Are you interested? And I went through the pros and the cons of it. And I said, you could buy this for $90. It could be 10 years down the road. It could still be worth $90. So this is not an appreciation play. But if your goal is cash flow, this might be a good idea.
Interesting.
And so what I like to do is, because every investor is different, their goals are different. Some are cash flow. Some are a high worth, high income W-2 employee in Silicon Valley, and they want a house with the least amount of headaches. Even if it's going to cash flow $100 a month, I want something that's 2014 or newer, like all the systems are newer. It's in a good school district. The tenants are going to stay 4, 5, 6 years because they're They're in the house for the schools.
Smart.
And so that's a safe investment for them. Whereas they want cash flow. So it's all about figuring out the best fit for that client and then going out and finding the property.
I think it's very important that people discover that for themselves. I think, I used to think that way, that Edmund was like dumb, but now I think that way because I was always about cash flow because I lived off of cash flow. But then when you really break it down, this lot and house is going to take work. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just to manage a property. And so the numbers just have to make sense. But like you said, it's not an appreciation play. It is ultimately probably worth $90,000 in 5 years from now. So I think it wouldn't
be a great deal for everybody, but it was for these guys.
But it makes sense because you can write it off, you can depreciate it down. There's a lot of advantage to that strategy. I think it's a great strategy. I think you should have a mix. I think you should have maybe 10 or 15% of your portfolio with these not so cash flowing properties, but they may have appreciation aspect to it. And then you have, a large based on cash flow. Again, it depends on what you're trying to do, where you're trying to be. Mm-hmm. It's just fascinating that, they picked Lawton over any other major city on the planet.
I know. Yeah, it is bizarre that, they're flipping homes in Scottsdale, but they're buying a fourplex in Lawton. That's not lost on me.
And Scottsdale and that market is extremely volatile.
Oh, I have one friend that they made an offer on a vacation home out there, $100,000 over asking, and didn't get it. So, but there's markets like that all over the country, and those people have money and they want to invest in real estate, but they can't where they live.
Yeah, when that thing dives down, I don't know. It's interesting. I was in Las Vegas when it went sky high, and then it collapsed and went right back down. And people it's almost like the stock market, and it happened so fast. Scottsdale's like that too. Arizona's like that. It's just interesting. I just not familiar with the market, but it's fascinating to read. Like New York and Florida, like New York is so cheap right now, but again the taxes are so high, and then rent control and COVID. It's like people are leaving New York City out of droves, and landlords per se. It's just things that I just read about. It just fascinates me.
One conversation I've thought about, and I kind of would be curious as to your perspective, is since real estate relatively recently has been identified as a safe investment for people to park money. When I represent investors, they're, a lot of times cash, but they have cash if they can pay for appraisal gaps. And I'll just give you, for instance, like we listed a basic house in Yukon, 4-bed, 2-bath, and we got 25 offers on it. And the best offers were, of course, the investors because they could pay for appraisal gaps. You don't have to worry about contingencies. They accept it as is. And then, but there's these FHA buyers and these VA buyers that they have really good jobs and good income, but they don't have cash and they can't do some of the other things the investors can. And that was just like one microcosm. But one thing I'm kind of concerned about, and it's weird for me to say this because I work with investors, is that there could create like an investor class and a tenant class, like in a generation where it'll be an anomaly for you to own your own home. And so while I do, think it's good for, I guess what concerns me the most is like the hedge funds purchasing whole neighborhoods, things like that. Because I think home ownership for the average family is the quickest and easiest path to upward mobility to create wealth. And I have concerns about, my kids and my kids' kids, will they have that opportunity to own their own home in a generation?
On it, like flippantly, probably not. It's the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. It's not what I agree upon or what I like upon, but it boils down to education. So let's look at it like this. In our financial institution, we're completely backed by real estate. Our whole economy is backed on all these loans, and this is how it works. Now, obviously the Fed has just shown that they can change things around like the wind. Let's just say banks stop loaning people money, and in general, that would prevent people from buying houses. In crypto, digital. Something could happen. Like you have to have an 800 credit score, or like in China now they're doing a measuring stick. If you have so many tickets, it goes against you. There's this weird culture coming. Let's just say you can't get money on an average person. They can't, and so thus they can't buy a house. But smart people can borrow privately, and I think that's where to educate your children if they want to borrow privately. I loan a lot of money privately, and I just think that we're eventually going to get to a point where we're just helping each other grow as individuals through not institutional lending, but private lending.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's
that's what I would do. I would educate, and I harp on this for years. Go learn how to ask for private money, because then you're in control. Like you said, the reason why you left your job is that you weren't in control. Mathis Brothers made one decision and affected your whole damn life. Well, banks can do the same damn thing. They could say, I'm gonna accelerate your mortgage. You're different today, so I'm not gonna loan you money. Or our policies change. Our ratios are different. You can bypass all that BS by becoming educated with private money and having a network of people. I have a lady that has been a blue collar person forever, and that's all she does. She barely has a IRA, and she loans it to me. Now, she's not some sophisticated real estate investor that tries to get 12% return, but she loans it to me at 6% because she's getting nothing in the savings account, and that's her retirement. That's her life. So I think to solve that problem is to educate young people, to build relationships with all people, and try to borrow private money, and then you're in control. Like, you have an option. And so when I look at deals, I'm like, the first thing I always do, and I just did a podcast, it just came out, I'm buying this Family Dollar. The first call I made after the realtor called me, I was like, I'm interested. It's probably a yes. Let me run it past. Let me just call you back. I don't even tell him what I'm doing. I call a private lender. He said, I'll loan you on it. And see, but I'm not going to use him. But I just have that as a backup scenario, just in case the bank does fail me, because you can get over leverage pretty quickly. Or they had a board change, and Mr. VanCauwenbergh, you're really cool last week, but this week, you got divorced or something. I mean, you never know what could happen. And so you just need to create options. Can you own a home someday? Absolutely. Maybe a tiny home in some small off place, but you can own a home and you can borrow private money. You can get 10 friends to loan you $50,000. That's a $500,000 house. You can get, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's possible. I just think that we're so used to, relying on the government for everything. Even school lunches, majority of all schools now provide lunches now, regardless if they're low income or not. And the government is in the banking institution is not guaranteed. And so don't think that way. Find another solution. Just like you found another solution. And it seems like you're perfect in this solution. You're laid back. You're very educated. You know what you're doing in real estate, and you're not trying to be. I think I see what I was trying to get to go in the question. It's like a lot of people are just damn greedy. And it's just like, I got to have every deal. I got to squeeze every inch out of it. Or they don't want to share the 3% or whatever their motive is. There's more than enough that can go around. There's more houses than I could ever even imagine. Why don't we share that? Why don't we work together? And that's why I really wanted you on the podcast, because when I met you and talked to you on the phone for only like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I felt that genuineness in you. Yeah,
I appreciate you saying that, because I think, I don't know.
I just want to bring life into you, because you're the only one out there. There's only 4 of you out there.
And that is a paid program, by the way. So I wasn't like David Green didn't interview me and decide that. But
but I understand.
Yeah.
But you ponied up. You sacrificed your money. Mm-hmm. Just why I'm not a big fan of CDC. Like I have missed meals so I can get this rental property, but you're telling me I can't evict somebody.
Yeah.
That's the same thing for you. You are smart. You took some of your commission, and you put it towards marketing, and that marketing avenue is bigger pockets.
And to your point about what we talked about accounting before we got on the podcast about investing in accounting and how it can pay off later. I'm a big fan of investing in myself, and not trying to take the cheap way out when it comes to my personal. Because I've done counseling before, it really helped me.
Oh yeah,
I've done.
It's called marriage counseling.
I've done a lot of personal, because I've been a wreck at certain points in my life. I remember, I won't even get into that part, but I've identified that if I shirk on my personal investing in myself personally, whether that's spiritually, financially, emotionally, then I'm going to pay the piper down the road. And so. I'm a big fan of reading, meditating, read the Bible every day.
You know this, man. You're the biggest asset. And if you're tired and burned out or negative, you're going to get those results. You have to invest in yourself. We put gas in a car. Why don't we put, I got this from Tony Robbins. I put 10% of my income back in investing in myself. I'm an avid reader as well. I hire a coach. People, I can't. I'm telling you, you heard this last podcast. I spent $300 for this attorney. She saved a closing for me. It was worth thousands of dollars. And I just spent $500 on something that I normally wouldn't have done. and it just helped me get through this circumstance. Oh, I was about to close this crazy property that you knew about, that 2-house package you called me on.
Yeah, which I will help that guy find a tenant, which is, I think it's kind of full circle because.
Yes, let's tell them what happened. So,
okay.
So when I was laying on the couch, Ben was blowing me up. Dude, this listing sucks, basically. And I was like, who is this joker? And he was slapping me around. I was like, damn, who is this guy? And he was trying to be nice, but he was very to the point. Like, hey.
Well, I was worried because I knew you. I've been to Landlord Lunch. I listened to the podcast, and I was worried that maybe you didn't know.
You had a service.
Yeah.
And I agree. I everything you said, I screenshot and blew up my realtor. I was like, bro.
And he stepped in real quick.
Well, so when I closed that real fast, all of a sudden we had photos up there. What was interesting is when I closed that deal and circled back, and Ben knew that buyer, which is even more crazier.
Yeah, a really interesting guy. He's from Denmark, and he's a ballerina or a ballerino.
Whatever. But here, let's get back to the $500. So I had a bunch of drama. If you heard that podcast where people were breaking in, sleeping in the property, and I had to make a $500 decision. Would I spend, and this is you, ladies and gentlemen, would you spend $200 to make $10,000? Would you hire a coach that can make you $60,000? I can over and over, I can give you 1,000 examples of you got to pay. And it was Tuesday, and these people were closing Friday. They were going to do an inspection, and people were living in there. So I pulled the trigger. I hired another junk out guy to clean all their mess up. Then I was like, but I called some investors. I mean, I'm thinking about doing an alarm, and some people were like, no, just do the $20 fake cameras. And I'm like, $200 from Simply Safe, $240, and $20 and some fake cameras and a clean out guy. So I spent $500 to close a deal that I netted $100 on. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but I normally hesitated and wasn't going to do that. And I'm just telling you, that's just what you need to do. And out there, ladies and gentlemen, you need to pay the money to invest in yourself. I paid $500 to hedge the protection around an asset that I did not want any longer to deal with. And I think you need to do that with your realtor. I think you need to find a guy like Ben Scott, and you need to invest in him because he is investing in you, not only with this 1 hour podcast, but also with bigger pockets. And so it's time for you to take him out to lunch. It's time for you to call him and see how you can serve him. And if we, like Ben said earlier, like Zig Ziglar said, the more that we can help other people, the more successful that we become. If I expect myself to be a millionaire, I want Ben to. And that's the main reason why I even had him on the radio show. He has served me, and I don't even know him. He helped me with that listing, which kind of set a little fire under my realtor. And then he's mentioned our accounting firm just casually. And it's just interesting. And I'm like, the least I can do is to let this world know in Oklahoma City. And if you're anywhere else and you're an out-of-state investor, that's his cup of tea. So let's go talk into that. What is your cup of tea? What is your specialty? What can you provide for somebody?
Well, right now we just need sellers. So, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you have a property that you want a good price for, please let me know because I most definitely probably have a buyer. And there's a lot of older landlords kind of getting out of the game right now, trying to cash out, and it's a good time to do it. Mm-hmm. Let that new generation come in.
Well said.
But I'd like to thank you because you provide a lot of value in my life. This is really the first time we've sat down. But I used to go to the landlord lunch where I met Rose, who's my accountant now, and just the podcast and the inspiration and you telling your story, the kind of rag to riches journey that you've been on has really inspired me. And I've taken a lot of tips from you, especially as it pertains to Section 8, when you have podcasts on Section 8.
I forgot about that.
Which I've been able to relay to my clients. So, I appreciate everything you do
absolutely.
here.
So how do people get a hold of you? Is there a way?
You can find me on Instagram.
Yeah, what is up with this Instagram?
It's just a good place to reach out. I mean,
that's just your, Twitter too, or just Instagram?
No, I don't Twitter.
So
I don't have any hot takes. No hot takes.
Interesting.
Yeah, you could. I mean, my email is.
Well, what's your Instagram? It was Ben. What is it? Ben Scott
Ben
Sells?
Scott Sells Homes. And I think the biggest resource I could be to anyone out there that's looking to get in real estate investing or maybe has a couple properties and is looking to scale is either join our weekly call or a bi-weekly call. We do a call every other Wednesday. And with
how do they find that?
Just reach out to me and I can send you the link. We do it every other Wednesday virtually. We also do quarterly meetups Our brokerage, I'm with Weston Main Homes, and our brokerage is just 6 blocks north of Bricktown. And so we have meetups at Prairie Artisan Ales, that brewery inside the building. So we do that once a quarter. Next one's May 19th.
Cool.
Physical. Physical meetup, but it's a good way to grow relationships, network. And, to your point, it's like, well, if you learned about a deal, why would you share it with anybody? I feel like the smartest and best investors I know are the ones that share the most.
Yep.
The folks that I've met here in the last, 3, 4, 5 years, the ones with the highest net worth are the ones most willing to help. So if you're a newbie out there, this is the place to meet those kind of folks. And so, I'd encourage anybody to reach out to me there, and we can get you set up on our call and on our quarterly meetups, and really, and ultimately, go grab coffee and identify what's the right property for you. Is it a house hack? If you're a young person out there with no kids and a good W-2 job, I would tell you to overpay for a duplex right now and live in one half and rent the other half out. Do it for 5 years, and
you can qualify. FHA.
You can qualify FHA for up to 4 doors. So that would be, and I tell a lot of investors, whether it's somebody who's going to live there, as whether it's an owner-occupied deal or an investor, in 5 years you will be glad you did this. There's a lot of headaches in that 30-day escrow period. There's a lot of surprises, a lot of emotions, especially if it's for a family. But in 5 years, you will be glad you did this. Don't be a renter forever. Don't leave your money on the sidelines. Don't invest it in the stock market because you have literally no control over it. Invest in yourself. And the only way you can really invest in yourself is through education and I think real estate.
Awesome. All right, Ben, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I can't wait to see where this takes you, and we'll have you back. I love what you said earlier. You said, hey, this documents history so we can see how far we've grown and what we've learned. And I think the next time that you're on the show, I think we should talk about the market.
Yeah.
What's happening and from now, and especially since you've been in pre-COVID to now, and obviously you're still fighting. There's still deals out there. Still doing transactions.
I mean, if there's like to your point, people pass away, people get divorced. There's always going to be somebody that needs to sell a house. And housing is one thing that everyone needs. We're not selling hamburgers. We're not selling iPods. We're selling a place for people to live.
That's right.
And so that will, in my opinion, never go out of style.
No, yeah. It's awesome. Anyway, thanks for tuning in to the Savvy Radio Show. Appreciate your time. Reach out to Ben Scott. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook, and always be buying assets.